Welcome back to Agree to Disagree and Still Be Friends. Yes, that's right. This is Robert, and I'm back from a wonderful weekend vacation with my wife, and I'm sitting beside...
Hi, I'm Jason Arnett, and welcome back, Robert. It is good to have you back in the studio. How was your break, man? How was the little vacation?
It was good. We headed down to St. Louis, and we had a stopover in Hannibal, Missouri, the birthplace of Mark Twain.
Hannibal, Missouri.
Yeah.
Is that what Hannibal Lecter was named after?
You know, one can only assume.
I assume it's the same thing, so it must be.
I don't know.
That's how logic works.
I don't know how that would have inspired him, but
that's not important.
Yeah, right. Went to AEW Wrestle Dream over the weekend, and that was my first wrestling pay-per-view, and I'm a huge wrestling fan, as you know, and
I do know that.
People listening have now been exposed to one of my, funny enough, mental illnesses.
I don't know if it's that.
It's a guilty pleasure. I like to call it a guilty pleasure, but I think some people in the world would look at least for a long time growing up and even through my adult life, it almost felt like people looked at wrestling fans as, you know, a subclass, and now we've kind of evolved into this world.
Yeah, I think as us Zennials and Millennials, you know, continue to thrive and take over the world, I think that the nostalgia train that I'm fully on, choo-choo, man. I anything retro, I am all about. Me and my mother just almost exclusively communicate in like vintage retro toy memes and things. It's great. So you love wrestling, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm a 45-year-old man who loves cartoons, old school cartoons, Hanna-Barbera. Muppet Babies is one of my favorite all-time cartoons, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. And of course, I dabble in animation as well, so I don't think it's a guilty pleasure as much as our generation seems to really respect yesteryear times, bygone times, the old days, and we love anything that's nostalgic.
I'm sure there's psychological ties to maybe being frozen in that time, or that was just, you know, better times, as the old folks would say.
It might be the last good times. It was certainly the last times before the internet. So it was the last of the times before the web. So yeah, we were there.
And are you implying that there are people that don't like cartoons?
I know for a fact, unfortunately, having, you know, been single and dating the past 6 months, I will tell you that it's not a popular sort of manly, respected passion. But, you know, once you find somebody that doesn't judge you for it, it's pretty special. It's pretty special.
There's so many different ways we could go with this. Just as funny because Braylon, my daughter, is into anime, and I used to call them cartoons. And if you know anybody that's into anime, if you call them cartoons,
that's why I use the term animation typically.
It's a dirty word. But yeah, I went to my first pay-per-view, and it was wonderful. It was amazing. It was long, and
like how long? Like this all-day event?
So doors opened at 5. The event started at 6, and we were there until 11:30 when the main event finished. And not to turn this into a wrestling podcast, I might do that on my own time at some point.
Someday, brother.
Someday. It was amazing. It was a lot of action packed into that time. And then Sunday, we actually went back to Hannibal because we only got to spend a little bit of time there before heading down to St. Louis on Saturday. But Sunday, we went back to Hannibal, and just a lovely little, like, Americana style, you know, shopping. And they had a big... it's called the Folk Live Festival. So it was kind of like a ginormous farmer's market / they were kind of dressed in old timey, give you a feel of,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was fun.
All of that sounds like I would love every moment of that. Yeah. As a man in my middle ages, I spend so much time at farmers markets and festivals like that, and walking around open air markets, looking at things and
everything and right next. So it's nestled right next to the Mississippi River. So we started Saturday morning by just driving down the Mississippi, doing some selfies and kind of just chilling by the river for a minute. And then we went to that festival, went down to Wrestle Dream, and then Sunday, we liked it so much. So we went back. Mark Twain's birthplace. There's just some gold there, it was really rich. We enjoyed walking around and kind of learning about that time period through his eyes. And
Yeah, that sounds cool, man.
yeah,
Well, I'm glad you had a good time.
but you were busy while I was gone.
Yeah, there was a few life events that happened, and I won't bore anybody with the details of it, but it was a tumultuous week. Not least of all, we unfortunately had to put down an animal, one of Chris's dogs, and that was heartbreaking. Clearly the right decision, but as those go, they're the hardest decisions to make. So, very proud of her for making the right decision, although I know it was crushing. So dealing with that and just some other things that that we all go through at least at some points in our life, if we're lucky enough. Part of this experience of joy is having it in relation to pain. So that's kind of how I look at it. But I went ahead and articulated some of those sentiments, maybe not the details, but the sentiments and the feelings and the emotions through a solo podcast that I did last Saturday in your absence. Almost just like a 11-minute monologue about my understanding of mental health in the modern age and how it may relate to my experiences. And then I did an interview with Chris, my partner, about mental health as well. And so that went up this morning. That's the first video podcast. Probably the last I'll do in a while because it sure quadruples the work. So audio is so much easier to deal with. So this one's going to be just for the ears, everybody. But welcome back, Robert. What did you have in mind for today? Sounded like there may be some reflection that we're going to be kind of moving into.
Well, I really appreciated the invitation and the vulnerability, in that as we dive into some potentially stigmatized subjects sometimes, and polarizing subjects, as we've said, the mental anxiety and the depression and everything like that is associated with trying to navigate these as a grown man in this case can be so overwhelming sometimes. And I love the invitation to basically know that you're not alone. I that really resonated. And as somebody who has dealt with my own mental health issues over the years, I really resonated, and I wanted to kind of touch on some of the things that first off, some people would listen to this and maybe be averse to hearing any of it or letting it resonate. And I want to invite, be open-minded to this, because you don't really know until it happens sometimes how bad things are. When my mom passed away in 21, the anxiety and everything that I had been self-medicating over the years really came to a head, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and it turns out it was just an anxiety attack. And I say just an anxiety attack, but I knew I was anxious. I knew I was depressed. I knew I was dealing with that. I'm self-aware, but I didn't realize how bad it was getting. And having spent a little time studying mental health, almost becoming a registered nurse, I really took fascination to the psychology unit we did, and learning about coping mechanisms and things like that. I learned a lot about self-awareness, but nothing prepared me for what felt like a heart attack that day. I was at work doing something pretty simple. Having been in the telecom field, like we both have, how simple it is to help somebody with a data transfer, and that's all it was. And I leaned over, I was helping this guy do a transfer between iPhones, and all of a sudden felt 3 sharp pains in my chest, and I mean, it was like pain. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm having a heart attack. My mom had a heart attack in a similar age, and I'm afraid that this is happening. So I immediately went to my manager, and I told them that I was going to the hospital because I was scared that I was having a heart attack. They ran a series of tests, spent all day there. Mr. Blake, your heart is fine. And I'm like, you sure? Because it didn't feel fine.
What the hell was that?
Yeah, so I followed up with my personal doctor the next day, and he handed me a sheet of paper and said, fill this out. And I knew that if I didn't fill it out as honest as possible, I was only doing myself a disservice. So answered some questions. He comes back and he's like, you have severe anxiety. And I'm like, well, I already knew I was an anxious person, doc. What does that mean? He's like, no. If you were a NFL running back and you broke your leg, you wouldn't keep trying to run on that. You would heal, and you would take some time off, and you would get better before you tried to work again. This is your brain telling you need to take some time off and reflect. And at that point, he asked me if anything crazy had happened in the last, a little amount of time. And within a span of a couple months, I lost my mom, I lost my cat of 20 years, and I got married.
Jeez.
In that order.
That's a lot, man.
Yeah. So, and then of course the anxiety attack happened and just became real. And I say all that to say the answer for me was going to the doctor. He prescribed some medicine. I've been on it since. Take it every night, and it helps. It helps. I at one point, like I said, I self-medicated, and I think I broke some things in my brain by doing that for a long time. And now I feel like what I do now helps to at least repair or assist with what's broken. But the invitation from last week, that is really why I felt the need to share all that, because, we call this agree to disagree and still be friends. And that's based on our own relationship. But I also want the people who listen to this to know that this is an invitation to you. Agree with us, disagree with us, we can still be friends.
Absolutely.
I really want our listeners to know that they can engage with us, and it's a safe space. And I love that you opened that door. And that was something I wanted to reflect on. And then, the coping mechanisms I talked about, I think that introducing more people to that aspect right now, there's a real reliance on, and I know that we anticipate going into an episode of this at some point, or an episode about this at some point. But there's a real reliance on electronics and our cell phones and social media for our mental health. And it's an unhealthy symbiosis, if you will, anymore. And so the coping mechanisms, learning coping mechanisms, somebody says something that hurts your feelings now, you just dislike it and move on to something that you do like. And, maybe you didn't really analyze why your feelings got hurt by what was said there. and you don't have to, because you can go and be in a room full of, and I say a room, a digital room full of people that support you. I believe you brought up the echo chambers even last weekend. And I think that understanding coping mechanisms is so important, because the way that people cope now is very unhealthy. And I say that as a general statement. I'm not saying that everybody is, as addicted to their cell phones as most of us are, but it's definitely, I think, at risk of saying a buzzword, pandemic, that people don't want to address.
I'll say that it absolutely has a massive influence and impact. I'm not sure these issues that we'll be discussing, I'm not sure how much of those are amplified by social media and just, given a louder speaker, as opposed to how much of it is caused by the feedback effect from social media. And there's certainly a fine line between, through social media and the internet, finding community and support, and, to my point last week, finding yourself in an echo chamber. And where is that line? When are you spending too much time indulging in the algorithm, and when are you willfully seeking community? And is that even the right place to find that kind of community? And I think that there's really no objective answers to any of these questions, and that's why they're so interesting to talk about.
I think that as we continue to evolve in our subjects that we talk about and things like that, this is a good place to bring it up, because some of our relationship really evolved around, you being there for me to listen. At that point in time, our friendship was growing, but you were also my general manager, and I was just coming to you for guidance as I navigated really a divorce and learning how to be independent from a very codependent situation, dealing with the depression and anxiety that came from being in that,
And we had to facilitate a move throughout that process. So it was a lot.
Yeah, I didn't really have time to even process a lot of that before I had to move back to Texas and take care of my mom, all that saying, we all have things that we're dealing with, and then this stuff gets thrown on top, and we have to parse it together. We have to figure it out while we're figuring the rest of that out. And I think it's more important than ever that we have a community that understands that they can reach out to guys like us, listen to guys like us, and hear that it's not abnormal to be dealing with those things while you're trying to make sense of all the craziness in the world. And that's what I really enjoyed about what you did last week. And just opening that door is, there's some things we can talk about. And coming from my faith background, that has helped me a lot as well with my coping. There's community aspects to it. There's prayer aspects to it, which, I'm sure there's studies and things like that on the benefits of prayer and the benefits of, just reflection. So, that kind of made me think last week too, how do I cope with the situations like what you're dealing with? And obviously I have a little bit more insight into what you're dealing with, because I'm your friend, and we don't need to go down that rabbit trail for everybody, but yeah, it's good to know that there are other people going through things. And
yeah, and I think it's valuable for the context of our program, us, being friends and having a lot of discussions and dialogue about how different our perspectives are, and being able to articulate to a general audience that two men that might be even perceived as one being more right and one being more left can still experience these same, issues that affect our mental health and be able to talk about it, outside of the context of politics or ideologies or religion, and, just be there, have an open discussion, and foster a path to like growth that healing can come from. I'm looking at ChatGPT at what some of the benefits, the mental health benefits of prayer are. And there's some objective data here. So I'm not going to bore anyone with the details, but if you're curious of that, yeah, just look that up. There are some published studies about the benefits of prayer on mental health. So,
well, obviously there's a reliance upon, and an understanding of who you're praying to, obviously, and the provision that's there, and the, for Christians, we're praying to our Father in heaven, and we know that he's going to provide. And ultimately the stuff that's out of our control, because there's so much that's out of our control that even we try to bring into the purview of being in control of it, and it's like sometimes just the acknowledgement that something is out of your control, and that somebody who cares about you is taking care of it is healing. But beyond that, there's a general reflection, there generally when you're praying about things in your life that you're grateful for. I start mine with a lot of gratitude, and it forces me to change my mindset. Even yesterday I was listening to I watched a podcast before work, and a guy was reflecting on some scripture that really opened the door for him to talk about being mindful of what you're thinking about, and how that impacts you throughout the day, and it was really helpful because at the time I was looking at bills and looking at forecasted income over the next couple months, and I was in it. I was in that moment. Speaking of being vulnerable, we're all living in this economy right now and trying to figure it out. And I was in a dark place to start the day, but this pastor was going over that scripture, and it put me in a headspace to think about, I've come through this before. I've been in tough spaces before, and I'll get through this too. And if I dwell on it from a negative aspect, I'm going to have a negative attitude about it all day. But I have the control to put a positive spin on it and be positive. And like we've talked about before, the radio tower, everybody has a different energy that they put out, and I have a big personality. I'm a big radio tower, if you will. And if I don't control that, I can bring the whole room down, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's super healthy to be aware of that. I mean, obviously that's one of the most important things as you reflect as an adult in the world of adulting. You got to understand that you have an impact on every person you come in contact with. And to what degree that's your responsibility, that's up for you to figure out. But I find it interesting that you describe these things that you sort of admit powerlessness over, or that you don't have control over. And those are great things to discuss through prayer and whatnot. And it makes me think of a recent short that I posted about radical acceptance, which is kind of I guess you would say the psychological, maybe agnostic atheist version of what you're describing, where we just sort of relent inside of our heads and understand that this reality that I'm feeling right now is real. These things are a thing, and I can't gloss over them. I can't repress them. These bills have to get paid. This issue has to be taken care of. This fire has to be put out. And the more I steer away from that, the unhealthier the trajectory seems to get. And I just, that's in psychology called radical acceptance. And it's really just one of the first steps on, finding what the path is. You've got to first accept the reality in which the path is contained. So I find similarities in your concepts and execution there in relation to mine. So that's pretty interesting.
Well, and I would say that part of that acceptance has got to be balanced with your acceptance of what has come to pass, and how, in biblical lore, if you will, the Israelites would put up, stones, or they'd make monuments to mark significant passages in the Bible. And it was instruction from God to do that so that they would remember what had been done there.
Okay.
And I think it's so easy to forget that, especially when a new problem has arisen, that we have navigated similar waters before, if not the same waters, and we made it through them, And so radical acceptance has to be balanced by remembering that you've come through this before. You've come through something like this before, and you're still here. We are still here.
But that very real phenomenon of nearly forgetting that, or feeling as though this moment that you're in is so novel that you have no experience to draw from to find out what comes next, and how much of a mental barrier that we self-inflict upon us that is. And one thing that I say often, and it's kind of a pseudo mantra of mine, is that really the only difference between my best and my worst days is how I feel about it. Objectively, I have had days in which things were very challenging, and it seemed as though the odds were stacked against me, whether it was in my career, not hitting a sales target, or whatever. I mean, these things happen. And I can come out of those days, those really hard days, feeling so accomplished and proud. And although I didn't get everything done, knowing that I tried my best and feeling good about that is a real sensation that is a wonderful feeling to have. And conversely, there's days in which it seems as though there's really nothing that's gone wrong. I mean, I can't identify, I couldn't put my finger on why I'm so shitty today. And it's just striking to me that, I can have a day that would, objectively, if I look at from the outside looking in, one would be a bad day and one would be a good day. But how I feel about those days is the converse. And that kind of lets me understand that I have much more control over my state of being than I have allowed in the past. So as I continue my personal journey of, becoming a healthier, better version of myself, day over day, and I have to do this for the rest of my life, one thing I'm coming to terms with is that I do have much more control over my circumstance and how I feel about it. I know what behaviors make me feel good about the situation, and I know which ones of mine are avoidant. And although those are comfortable in the moment, I also am very well aware that the other side of that is going to be a fire that has to be put out, because I've been indulging in this willful, sort of almost masking the fact that I have to be an adult and there's a world going on around me. So it's tough. It's tough. But what I do know is that how I feel about these experiences, I may not have control over the thoughts at all times, but I do have the ability to put myself into a direction in which I can reflect on my past, much to our point a moment ago, and use those experiences of getting through similar or even worse things, and just use that to ground myself and remind myself that more than likely, over the course of the next few months, or maybe even sooner, this day is going to be A, forgotten about, or B, reflected on in a much different light. And it won't be as bad once I get through it. And I guess that's a gift from future Jason to past Jason, and vice versa. So yeah, it's interesting how we decide to, traverse this thing we call life.
That's almost a little Jason Inception. I would be doing a disservice to our support network if I didn't mention another element of our mental health, and say I kind of glossed over real quick that we've been friends for a long time, and I came to you for guidance. The other side of that invitation was, you said you're not alone. And I think it's so important in a world where people are alone with their cell phones that they understand that they are not alone with their cell phones, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And what I mean is, I wouldn't have been able to, who's to say I wouldn't have been able to, but it would have been much more difficult had I not had friends like you and other friends. They know who they are, to navigate some of these situations and have people to talk to, people to tell me I'm not crazy, people to tell me I am crazy when I am. Like if I'm getting off the rails, you got to have people that tell you that's not how we act. That's not how we deal with that. So I just wanted to reiterate, in that context, our listeners, as they tune in and hopefully tell their friends, tell their buddies, you're not alone. You're not alone. And just because somebody says something that hurts your feelings doesn't mean that they don't like you. It just means they disagree with you. And that can be worked past. I can't stress enough that there's probably a wealth of things that I don't agree with that you probably think or feel. And some of my closest friends in the world, same thing. There's things that they are passionate about, or things that they believe in that maybe I just don't. That's okay. That's called individuality, but that doesn't mean that we need to isolate because of our individuality. And it's never a good thing to isolate and put yourself in an echo chamber where you just reinforce beliefs that isolate you from your friends and your family.
Yeah Balance.
Yeah,
because you do need that personal time alone to reflect. That's where a lot of healing and growth and perspective change does happen. I mean, that's where you can be honest more so than anywhere else, is when you are alone. But there's a big difference between that I'm describing and isolating. And it's easy to slip into the latter when you're on social media. It just is it's a really powerful tool for that. Whether that's the intent of it or not, that is something that it can do. It can draw you into this place in which you feel highly engaged. Your nervous system is certainly behaving that way, but when you really look at what you're doing, these are very shallow, transactional bits of engagement that is in no way ever going to replace meaningful connection. So,
Wait, you mean all those people don't like me?
the thing is they don't know you. That's what I've come to find. Those people that follow me on social media, they're wonderful, I'm sure. But most of them I've never met. We've never engaged. We might look at each other's content, and within that, there's some fun to be had and there's connections to be made, but that in and of itself is definitely not meaningful connection.
But they hit the like button, Jason.
Yeah, and I got the dopamine receipt for that too. So yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, that I've seen the next generation, we'll just say, and that's not just a Star Trek reference.
That is the best one though.
Yeah, I mean, easily.
Jean-Luc.
Man, that's gonna get me off track there. We just watched Picard and it was amazing.
Oh man,
No funding or anything, just
Sir Patrick Stewart. I'll tell you what.
But I've seen coworkers and I've seen the younger generation sitting there and just swiping and liking without even actually taking time to.
I do it. I'll come across somebody's post that I just follow and I like them, but I'm in a hurry, man. I don't have time to listen to it. And I know damn well that happens with my content. Look, I put out stuff where I'm speaking to the camera. It's mostly my face and my words. It's boring to a lot of people. So I know, thank you for the like, but I'm aware that a lot of you aren't actually listening to the content or watching it, and I do the same. It's a thing that we all do on social media. Double tap to give the heart, keep on scrolling. That's part of the transaction. I want a heart from you in the future is what that says. And it makes sense. I mean, we are social creatures.
We're all hearting each other's.
And I think that's perfectly acceptable. It's just no replacement for meaningful personal connection. It's hard work, right? Maintaining friendships, for me, for a guy like me, with my attachment style and my personality type, maintaining meaningful connections is extremely hard. And I think that's, when we talk about neurodivergence, whether it's developmental or whether it's emotional, it doesn't matter. All of those things play into that formula, and it can be very hard to maintain meaningful connections. But anything worth doing probably is going to be a little bit laborious. That's usually how it works in this world of human experience.
I think in the context of that, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and even issue a challenge, next time you feel inclined to like a post or like a meme or something like that, maybe comment on that person, their profile or whatever instead, and just tell them something you like about it.
I like that. And that's a challenge you're saying, brother?
Oh, potentially. I don't know. It might just encourage a conversation. And a conversation is often how friendships start, I think.
I agree. And they can definitely form online. And there can be meaningful connections and deep personal relationships with people that you only know digitally. I know it exists. I know a lot of people, especially of a younger generation that I'm, raising in my own home. I see that as sometimes the primary means of meaningful connection. So I guess if it's what you prefer and it's all you've got, make the most of it, but focus on those key aspects of, a deep, meaningful relationship. And that is being vulnerable. That's being open. It's being honest. It's being yourself and allowing yourself to be loved by someone by being all of those things. And that's scary as shit.
Yes.
But it's also very rewarding. And we are just built that way. We evolved that way. And it's why we are the dominant species on Earth, because we rely on each other. We are not meant to be alone. And if you're somebody who is alone and you're enjoying it, maybe tell us how you doing that, because I can't imagine that. But if you're alone and you wish you weren't, reach out. We do have tools for that. Social media has a lot of evils. I think we've talked a lot about those, but it's also a way that you're able to have access to virtually anyone in the world to some degree or another. And within that, there is a way. And, speaking of that, we appreciate any comments or any engagement that we get on any of our content, this podcast in particular, because we'd really love to mine from that our next topics. And we want to be engaging, and we want to, form a community, and we want to be a part of something that fosters meaningful connection and open dialogue, especially amongst individuals that might not otherwise find themselves in the wild, if you will, achieving that. So having said that, we'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, make a comment.
Like us.
Heart us. I need that dopamine hit, and I'll save the receipt, I promise. Any final statements from you, Bobby?
You're not alone. I wanted to reemphasize that. I know I've said it, but in a world that, especially a digital world, that it feels like you're out there by yourself, you're not.
Amen.
Hit us up.
Appreciate that, and welcome back. It's good to have you back in the studio. Guys, this has been Agree to Disagree and Still Be Friends, and as always, we greatly appreciate you listening. And like we said, give us a like, subscribe, give us some comments. Whether it's positive or negative, it's all engaging, and we appreciate it all. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.